there are legitimate questions that need to be asked.
What happened to the piece of research you mentioned that appeared to corroborate the AHA journal pre-publication article? What happened to that piece of research?
Yeah, unfortunately, Majid, at the moment, that particular department is afraid of publishing that research because they don't want to lose money from the drug industry. And that raises another big important issue about integrity of research in British institutions. So over the years, academic research in British institutions, most people think that it comes from public money. It doesn't. It comes from the drug industry. About 66% now of research that it comes out of academic institutions is funded by the drug industry, which obviously creates a huge bias in terms of what's being published and the interest of those researchers. And when there was an investigation done by the Science and Technology Committee, in fact, a review a few years ago, looking at research integrity, there were some very worrying findings. One of the things that's come out is that we know that 14% of researchers in higher institutions report that they know of a colleague that has fabricated data. 34% say they know that colleagues have selectively reported outcomes of research. So there's a big problem with research integrity. And just to give you one example, it's not scaremongering. I wrote about this in The Guardian a few years ago. I gave a talk in the European Parliament about it, about why we need an inquiry into research in British institutions. One Dutch researcher, Majid, a few years ago, a cardiologist, was found guilty of fabricating data that led to the unnecessary prescription, because he influenced guidelines, of a drug called beta blockers in a very specific situation of people undergoing non-cardiac surgery. Ultimately, it was calculated that his fraudulent research, which resulted in this prescription over many, many years, may have likely resulted in 800,000 excess deaths in Europe over 8 years. So this is a big problem that we are trying to deal with. And don't just take my word for it. Richard Smith, the former editor of the BMJ, in response to many scandals in British institutions, very prestigious institutions in the last few years, wrote not so long ago, he said, something is rotten in British medicine, and it has been for a long time. But I want to put things in context here, because we're talking about COVID, we're talking about this research. We need to just take a step back and have an honest conversation about COVID as well, Majid. So when we look at COVID, and John Ioannidis, professor of medicine at Stanford last year, looking at the infection fatality rate, how serious is COVID? And he's been proven largely, his findings have been proven largely true. So just to summarize, he said last year that in terms of COVID's effect on people, it is devastating. There's no doubt about it, particularly devastating for elderly people, frail people. It can be devastating in hospitals. Okay, for people in middle age, the effect of COVID in terms of its risk is quite similar to the flu. People at low risk, that basically means young adults and kids, it is less lethal than the flu. Now, this is very relevant when we talk about the vaccine, about how effective it is. I have no doubt from real world data that the vaccine is effective at preventing serious illness and death. But we now know, and we've discussed this before, it has no significant effect on reducing transmission. It probably doesn't have any convincing evidence that it reduces infection, because many of the people who are spreading infection now, these cases, are people who are fully vaccinated.
Indeed, the government of Botswana stated that even the new variant they discovered among 4 people was among 4 fully vaccinated people.
Well, exactly, Majid. And of course, this is not like traditional vaccines. If you look at, and by the way, I'm somebody that has been a very strong advocate for vaccines. My left arm is covered in scars from vaccines that I've had over the years, whether it was smallpox, BCG for TB, Hep B, Hep C, MMR.
Likewise, by the way, I have similar scars. Yeah.
I went on Good Morning Britain several months ago because Gurinder Chadha, the film director, who's a friend of mine, had vaccine hesitancy, and I thought that she was high risk. She discussed it with me. I told her she should have the vaccine. She tweeted it out. They wanted me to come on and explain why vaccine hesitancy was there and how I felt for her it was the right thing to do. I now changed my opinion slightly, not a lot, but one of the things I must mention, another cardiologist, and by the way, I'm not going to again name this person for obvious reasons. This is, in my view, somebody I've known for a while, probably one of the smartest, highest integrity cardiologists, most published cardiologists in the country. He's similar age to me. Several months ago, he told me, Asim, I have not had the Pfizer vaccine or any vaccine. He's a PhD. He's extremely smart. And he made that decision because, one, he knew he was low risk, and he's in his 40s. He thought that he would be able to handle COVID. He's very fit and well. And two, he had concerns about potential long-term effects. Now, this cardiologist contacted me. He's very upset in the last few days as well, because, as you know, Sajid Javid has come out and said we should mandate the vaccine for NHS staff. He, at the moment, is in a big dilemma because he has until April to decide, but he's a very principled person. He's very concerned by what's going on. And at the moment, he's made a decision that he is not going to take the vaccine. So, if this happens, he will have to leave the NHS. The NHS won't just lose, an amazing doctor. They'll lose one of the smartest, most brilliant minds in cardiology in the country.
Indeed. Now,
so this is a major problem. We have to deal with this head on.
We're very short on time and in fact, over time. Just last question for you. And the question of excess deaths we're going to continue speaking of here on this show. But you have been, on some of the remarks you just made here, on Facebook, you have been fact-checked by Logically, one of the world's largest fact-checkers, who said Malhotra's comments are highly misleading and vastly exaggerate the risk of heart problems following a COVID-19 vaccine. His comments are based on a recently published abstract from American Heart Association's journal circulation. The paper lacks credibility and has been cited by a number of COVID-19 skeptics and conspiracy theorists over the past week. How is Facebook correcting a consultant cardiologist on his expertise?
Majid, it's a very good question. And with all due respect to that person who did that, I think that I looked at that rebuttal. It is full of errors. It's not transparent and open. It is not anything that has scientific integrity, in my view. And what I've learned, by the way, very briefly, I had a similar situation a few months ago where Facebook banned me for 24 hours for publishing verbatim an article published in the Journal of the American College of Pediatrics, basically showing that face masks for children could increase anxiety. They banned me for 24 hours. My conclusion now, personally, is wittingly or unwittingly, the Facebook fact checkers are not independent, they're not scientific, and as far as I'm concerned, they're vectors of anti-democratic misinformation. And we must mention one thing here. This is not about conspiracy theories. It's about how business is done. Many of the people who are making decisions about health policy and the way forward have huge conflicts of interest. People have influence. If you look since the beginning of the pandemic, Majid, the top 10 richest people in the world, and people that include people like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, their wealth increased by $540 billion. Pfizer, through their vaccine rollout, is going to make $36 billion. There's a huge conflict of interest here, which in my view is actually and is ultimately, and the antithesis of democracy. And I'll just finish with one thing, which I think is more important. We need greater transparency, greater accountability. And in medicine, when you do that, you get better quality care for patients. A quote from the second president of the United States, just to finish: the preservation of the means of knowledge amongst some lowest ranks is of greater importance to the public than all the property of all the rich men in the country.